The City Council historically begins its session with an invocation offered by one of the religious leaders of our community, with full appreciation of our shared belief that we are one nation under God. And while the city cannot endorse any particular religion, we respect the religious freedom and freedom of expression of all our citizens to pray as they feel led to pray. This evening's invocation will be given by Mark Bowd, Senior Minister, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilmember Ham.
Our Father in heaven, we bow our heads before Thee and express unto Thee our gratitude to meet this evening. As community members, we're grateful for those who lead our great city. We're grateful for our Mayor, Kathy Ward, for our council members, for our city manager, our clerks, our city attorney, all of those who play such a vital role to make our community safe and the best it can be. We're grateful for these community members who have gathered this evening and pray that Thou will bless us with Thy Spirit as we discuss those issues which are important and must be decided upon. We ask Thee to bless our community, that if it be Thy will, we might be spared the tragedies, both natural and man-made, that have befallen others. We mourn the losses that have been experienced. We pray that Thou will bless those who suffer. Help us to be kind to one another, to do those things that show love one to another, and allow us to live in harmony and peace, regardless of our race or religion or creed. We express unto Thee the many blessings which are ours in living in such a beautiful area. We pray that we might seek to live worthy of these blessings and do so humbly in the name of Thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Doncheck. Councilmember Ham.
Here.
Councilmember Swartz.
Here.
Mayor Ward. And Mayor Pro Tem Brown is absent. First item on the agenda is a toll road update.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just wanted to give you a little heads up. We believe the next City Council meeting, we're going to have prepared for Council an initiation of zoning changes. Pursuant to the Council's direction, we've gone through every layer of City General Plan enactments, Measure V, zoning land use regulations, and a stack of specific plans that have been adopted in San Clemente. And what we've done there at Council's behest is to go through and comb out any reference or any designation of right-of-way for the 241 extension through San Clemente. Since that extension is now an impossibility due to the settlement entered into last year, we wanted to bring forward those cleanup amendments to have before you next time. So community development staff and my associates have been working hard to make sure we have all those. We have support from the associations that own that space and own the land that's so designated, and so we should have that back for you ready to initiate at your next meeting, so that can be well underway by year's end. So that's the report for this week.
Is there any other announcement to make?
Oh, yeah, we did want to announce also that we filed, thank you, Mayor, I almost forgot. The city had filed a motion to remove our case from Orange County to a neutral county. We had proposed having the case heard in Los Angeles, but rather than that, the court decided that venue should be changed to Riverside County. So we're in the process now of filing those papers to make that official, and the city's case will be heard in Riverside Superior Court.
Thank you for that update. We do have one speaker, and that is Mark McGuire.
Good evening, Mayor, Ward, members of the council. Mark McGuire, resident of San Clemente. I just wanted to update you. I had a meeting with Mr. Kramen, the CEO of the TCA, who was kind enough to take some time and talk about some of the issues with me. I did appreciate that very much. I want to clarify something that I've been speculating about. We've been, in a lot of these 3-minute presentations, we've been trying to figure out what exactly would they try to do if they're going to bring this road, Idea 14, through our open space in Forester Ranch and Marblehead and then connect to the 5. We've speculated that they would want to go to the middle of the 5 and not come from the outsides like the 73 does. I think that's been confirmed that if they're going to pursue 14, that it would be via middle lanes in the 5. And if you go on the ocmoving.com webpage that the TCA has put together, they have some new exhibits regarding Idea 14 that is, you'll have to, I don't want to navigate the whole thing, but you have to go under the updates and the frequently asked questions, find the question about Idea 14, and you will see aerial exhibits showing what they're contemplating if they're going to pursue Idea 14. Why is that important? Well, it's the middle of the 5. It's confirmed in talking to Mr. Kramen that if that idea was pursued, it would be 4 lanes added to the middle of the 5 from just south of Pico down to Basilone Road. I asked, are you thinking of elevating that? Because if you remember the last meeting, I said, how would they do that without having to widen and take properties along the way? And there were survey questions that implied that improvements to the 5 would have to require widening, but that the through pass, this toll road concept, would not. He said, no, it would require widening. So to get 4 lanes in the middle of the 5, and this is the key point, the key takeaway that I want to make tonight, is South San Clemente needs to be concerned about what Idea 14 is doing. We've said this before, but it just reconfirmed that to me, that the concept would have to be 4 lanes all the way through town. You would have to widen the 5. You would have to take properties to do that. And he conceded that if Idea 14 moved forward, that would be the case. He's not saying that that is the idea that they're pursuing, that they're looking at all alternatives, you know, the typical caveats that or qualifiers that he would add, but that's what he said. The other thing that he said, just to finish up, if I can have 10 more seconds, is that he said that, I said, would it be something that's like an expressway where you can't get onto this road? Because, Mayor, you testified at one point or reported at one point that at this point, it's not clear that there would be any access to this road. We would get all the burdens and no access to this road in San Clemente. He said, well, I think if the road actually happened, then we'd have to find a way to get access too. So the implication was that if you built this road and people conceded that the road was going to happen, then at some point you'd have to figure out where you'd take access in San Clemente. I don't know where that might be. You know, in the past, there was an on-ramp basically between Rancho San Clemente and Marblehead in these sorts of BC alignments. I don't know if it would be there or somewhere else, but the idea was that it wouldn't just be the road, but there'd have to be some access somewhere else too. So anyway, that's the latest that I know about this, and I sure hope Southwest San Clemente and South San Clemente becomes very alarmed about what's being proposed. Thanks.
Before you step down, I just have a couple questions since we're on the TCA subject. Laura, I just sent you an email. Can you see if you can pull that up real quick and put it on the display? If this is the display you're talking about, I'd like to show it before you step down, just
that'd be
confirm
great.
this is the one.
Yeah.
When did you find this?
It's, you know, there's a great group of people in San Clemente that are very vigilant, and so I think I saw it on what I call the Facebook, because I'm ancient and I still call it the Facebook. And then the only reason I'm on the Facebook is so I can get these updates regarding the toll road, and someone put it on there and I quickly linked to it. So, yeah, so it's getmovingoc.com, is that it? Is it a
Yeah, I
.com?
sent a link. I think it's the one
Yeah.
you're referring to. There's it's a active digital map and you can select different sections and those blow up? Is that the one you're talking about?
Exactly. And, you know, as she's trying to do that, I would say, you know, it's showing a very thin line through these open spaces. You know, you'd obviously have to do massive amounts of grading on both sides of that line to actually build the road.
So are you thinking that once they tell everyone there isn't an on or off
kind of
ramp,
pain.
and it's just a tube down the middle, and once they get everyone to possibly ever agree to that, then they would say, oh, then we need on and off ramps, which would be more of a taking to get room for those.
More impactful,
More
either
impactful.
raw land or properties. And again, I want to be careful. I respect that Mr. Kramen took the time to talk to me. He was not saying that this is the official proposal, but he was saying that if this concept were pursued, it would be pursued in the manner that they're showing on that exhibit, that this is the type of thing that they would pursue. And the key points, again, are that it would be express lanes in the middle of the 5, essentially. So 2 lanes in each direction connecting to the middle of the 5. And then he said, in response to the concern about any access, he said, well, if this road ever did get built, then we'd probably have to provide access. So
Is that what you're referring to?
that's exactly it. There's a series of photos that show, and you can see that rather than coming from the outside and having lanes that taper into to connect to the 5 freeway, you just go straight into some dedicated lanes that would also be tolled, frankly, all the way through town. So that's
Mayor, I just asked if we could add this link to our growing TCA webpage on
that's
our.
a great idea.
That's a
Awesome.
great idea.
Thanks for bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the toll road update.
See the students, presentation by Carney Campbell and Trey Russell, San Clemente High School students concerning campus activities. I think they're all for
They're on break. I don't
Thanksgiving.
think they want to come do any work this week.
Okay. Okay. Okay, then next is a presentation by Lori Gooch, Talega Homeowners Association representative, to the Richard and Donna O'Neill Land Conservancy concerning reserve activities and programs.
Okay, hi, council members and Mayor Ward. There's something new this year that the ranch is instituting, and they're going to have an annual turkey trot. So it's going to take place not on the Conservancy, but on the ranch itself. Are you doing it? Yeah, I'm volunteering, so I'll see you. I'm going to volunteer. Yeah, so I'm at the snack station. Turkey trot. Yes. Yes. So I think that's going to replace the hike after your Thanksgiving Day feast hike that takes place on Friday. They're not having that this year. And then earlier in the month, they did have Thanks Nature Family Walk. So that kind of replaced that walk on Friday also. And then they continue to have astronomy night and different lectures, and most of the hikes take place on the Conservancy. They do some stewardship activities now on their headquarters, that's off Ortega, but they still have the Monday and Saturday trail clearing at the Conservancy, Richard and Don O'Neill. That's it.
So, Laura, is it an uppy-downy trail?
I don't know what the course is. I haven't seen it. But I know it's between Sendero and Estancia.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're going to wear Hawaiian shirts and represent for San Clemente.
Yes.
Are you going to have a turkey lead the walk?
Oh, that would be an
On a
excellent
leash?
idea. Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you, Laura, for that.
thanks.
Appreciate it.
Members of the audience who wish to address council on matters that are within the jurisdiction of the City of San Clemente, but not separately listed on the agenda, may do so during the oral communications portion of the meeting. A total time limitation of 30 minutes is allocated for oral communications part 1, with each speaker being allotted 3 minutes, which to give his or her presentation. And I do have a couple cards.
Our first speaker will be Nancy May, followed by George Gregory. And George, can you come up after her? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Nancy May, and I live in San Clemente. I've provided some pictures and email correspondence with Randy Little from the city. I am asking the city council to consider my request to have the city-owned camphor tree in my front yard removed. We have owned and lived at this property for 32 years, and while we have enjoyed the tree over the years, it has now become a nuisance and a liability hazard. As you'll be able to see in the pictures, the tree is causing more damage to my property. Over the years, the tree base has continued to grow up above the ground level, and at the city's expense, the water meter has been moved, the curb and driveway have been repaired, and here we are again needing more repairs. The sprinkler lines are being choked by the roots, and I'm concerned of damage to water and sewer lines that the tree can cause, not to mention the liability this tree poses. We've had many trip and falls because of this. I've sprained my wrist. I even had a trick-or-treater this year, a little boy fall. This is not a liability that I want to bear. The camphor tree is very brittle, and there is a limb that hangs over my driveway and roof, and it's not unusual for these to snap and fall. The city has said they would make repairs again and do some root pruning, and this is really not a satisfactory solution for me. It seems like a waste of time and money for the city for what will be an ongoing financial and liability problem. I would ask the city council to reconsider and remove this tree from my property. And if this is not to be the outcome, I would like to be assured that any damage or liability problems that this tree causes are the responsibility of the city and not me. Thank you.
James, I think this is an ongoing issue, I believe. Okay, I think I've already gotten emails on this. It's the same tree. Thanks.
Evening, Council. George Gregory, oversized elf. Sorry, it's a thyroid problem. I can't help it. I'm here to thank the people who have helped us in the last 6 years with the bicycle drive for the Boys and Girls Club. It's a phenomenal thing. I think we're over 100 bikes now. It's tax deductible. The charity of San Clemente, the men and women that live here, is phenomenal. The bikes are for children. Some of these kids have never even learned how to ride a bike, much less owned one. The health and safety that comes along with the bike is phenomenal. I can guarantee no shark attacks while you're riding a bicycle. If you'd like to see your name in the paper, please buy a bicycle. That seems to be a good way to get your name in the paper. I can't teach these children balance on a ship or anything like that, but learning how to ride a bicycle is a good start. This year, my nerves are a little shattered. I've been hanging out with a bunch of elves dressed in green with little squeaky voices, and we kind of started late, so we're in a big hurry. Anyways, it's a great thing. Please stop by Bicycle San Clemente. Say hello to Pete. If nothing else, thank the Secret Santa. It's all because of him that this happens. So it's a really fantastic thing that we're doing for the boys and girls at the Boys and Girls Club. Here's a couple flyers, Mr. Matchnoff.
So George, this again this year is through the Boys and Girls Club?
This will be through the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
And we let staff vet the boys and girls. No bad boys and girls get bicycles.
Right. So I think the kids do different things throughout the year and show progress and things that they're doing or leadership, and then they look forward. They know that these bikes are coming. If anyone wants to do it, just we've done it every year, my husband and I, and knowing that on Christmas Day that there's a kid riding a new bicycle makes me feel good.
It's a great program. Like I said, some of these kids have never even ridden a bicycle. Some of them have to learn. We've ran out of bicycles in the past, and people have bought helmets and stuff for them. Some people don't have everything other people do. And it's really sad to be a kid with no bicycle when everybody goes charging by on their bicycles, safe from shark attack.
These bikes, one, look cool, too. I've been gone, and I got in and actually filled it out and wrote my check today, so it's on its way.
Fabulous, thank you, Mr. Swartz.
But I think it's definitely, everyone should get behind it. I've been a supporter of the Boys and Girls Club for over 20 years now. They helped me with my son quite a bit in the younger years. And I just think this is a great opportunity for the people to give back, so.
Plus, we have our brand-new bicycle trail along El
Yeah.
Camino Real, too. Great place to ride, safe place to ride from
Okay.
Sharks.
So again, this is Urban, where did I see it? Urban Bicycle Outfitters in North Beach.
Right, they're
By the
straight.
train station.
Straight across from Flowers and Friends, over Kalani Coffee. Sadness, Kalani Coffee is closing next week on Sunday. Keith will be there, still selling flowers. And we'd be happy to see y'all. Come on by.
Thank you.
George, before you step down, can you just talk a little bit about what you do and how you're involved in this program? Because this is a great program that you and Pete have been spearheading for as long as I've been on council. And I think a lot of people probably see you as the guy who just comes up and yells at council, but this is one of the cool things that makes San Clemente great and what makes you great. So talk a little bit about yourself and what you do for this program.
Well, I'm not all bad, you know. And we kind of felt left out once upon a time. And we had the toy train coming by, which we missed terribly. But we felt like when the Playa del Norte thing was actually going on, we felt like we were left out. Our voice wasn't heard and stuff like that. We said, well, let's get a couple bikes for the toy train. Lo and behold, everybody thought that was such a great deal that we collected all this money and we couldn't find any bikes. We thought we were going to be lynched. We were scared. We had to drive to Compton along the railroad spur and stuff and go to the scary warehouse and pick up these bicycles and stuff and assemble them. And it was a hodgepodge of bicycles. We had like 5 of this kind and 6 of that kind. And the fire department showed up to collect up the bicycles. And they're like, where did all these come from? And we don't know where to put them. Because really the toys don't go on the train, they go on the truck. And so it was very interesting, but it was so much fun to do that we've been continuing to do it. And now that we've landed in the Boys and Girls Club, we really feel like that's where we need to be and that's where we'd like to be.
Great. Well, thanks again, George.
Thank you for your time.
Could we have a motion to waive reading in full of all resolutions and ordinances?
Second.
Motion by Ham, second by Swartz, all in favor? Aye. Passes 4-0.
Closed session report, city attorney.
Thanks. There was no reportable action taken. Oh, and we did not discuss the first matter of litigation, the Villa San Clemente lawsuit.
Items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion unless council staff or the public request removal of an item for separate discussion. The public has requested the removal of item H.
Move the balance.
Motion by Donchek, second by Ham, all in favor? Aye. Passes 4-0. Item H. So we'll go ahead and hear from the public first. We have quite a few cards. I'm going to call your names, please. When I call 3 names, stand up behind each other so that we can get through these cards. First speaker will be Anthony Lafrano, followed by Steve Cortez, followed by TJ Orr. And please come up.
And for those that are watching, this is the short-term lodging unit ordinance review.
I think I'll accumulate them because there'll be more, I'm sure.
Good evening. We just want peace. We've got the TCA, Sovereign Health, Sober Living, VRBO, Sharks, which we can't control, transients. We need more hotel space in town, but we can't turn our neighborhoods into hotel rooms. I'm going to use Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative to help you make a decision on this, and it's basically the golden rule to being an ethical person. Would you want a VRBO next to you? If the answer is no, then you know how to vote on this. Why would you think that any family would want this next to them? Can you imagine your weekly battle with the angst, wondering who the next lodgers will be? Will they be loud? Will they be drunk? Will they fight in front of my kids again on the streets? Will they yell? Can you imagine the angst that our residents must feel? If your answer to my question, would you want this next to you, is no, then you have your imperative. Let's talk about the pity party argument, which you're going to hear. We spent our life savings on this business model to have this VRBO. We need this for retirement income. Don't feel sorry for these people. This is a horrible business model and an even worse retirement plan. As a retirement plan, it lacks diversification. It's putting all of your eggs in one basket. And it's not the responsibility of the voters of the city of San Clemente to make sure that their retirement plan works out. Investing in hotels and restaurants is risky. Mr. Brown and Mr. Schwartz might argue that they don't want to pay any more legal fees. I would argue that this is a quality of life issue, and we always need to spend the money on quality of life, similar to TCA. We have been bullied long enough from outsiders. Ed Connor, TCA, VRBO owners, and Brenda Boss, who doesn't even live here, who's going to tell you who to house, where, how, and why. This is a good use of city money, but we need a 5-0 decision to show these investors that we will not be intimidated. We need a 5-0 decision. I know Ms. Donchek dissented last time because of a fax. I hope you've had time to think about the issue. Let's vote 5-0 to show some solidarity and some resolve on this issue, and keep this ordinance as is. You have the genie in the bottle. Don't let it out again. It'll be very hard to get it back in. I'm counting on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes against this. We don't want this in our town. We don't want it in our neighborhoods. These people have suffered long enough. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Cortez? And I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
No, that's correct. Steve Cortez, and I have a property on 307 West Palizada. That's a beach property that we bought to retire in about 5 years ago, and our principal residence is in Anaheim Hills, California. So hopefully I don't get shot in the back here after that. I'm not afraid, but I'm here to talk to you about our beach house and what's happened with the short-term rentals. When we bought our house 5 or 6 years ago, we bought it with the idea that we would retire here, but we also realized that maybe we should rent it out for a few weeks, and so we started doing that. So we rented out 6 or 7 weeks during the summertime mostly. And the people we rent it to are the same type of people that we are, and for the reason that we bought here, they're families. We don't rent to people with a carload of kids that come here and drink and fight in the street. We rent to people 6 times a year that are the grandparents, the parents of maybe 3 or 4 kids, and their family comes as one, and they want a house because they can't be in an apartment. It just doesn't work for them. So a house is the best way to do that. So I want to talk about, briefly here, 3 different points that will hopefully convince you to include my property within the map that's already been drawn, which I got from your finance department here, to allow me to have a temporary rental during the summer. So first is the kind of families which I mentioned. The property that I have is right around the corner from the community center. So the people that occupy my property are the ones that walk around the corner, go to the restaurants, eat out, buy food there. They go to the shops. They help the local businessmen stay in business. They don't drive cars. They don't create congestion. I have 4 parking spaces at my house, 2 in the driveway, 2 in the garage. So everybody's walking either to the beach to get down there, or they're walking around the town to help the local businesses. As to the point number 2 I wanted to make was the geographical relevance of my house versus the map that's already been drawn. So all around my property, the map is showing that short-term rentals are being allowed, but for some reason, the street that I live on, Palizada, is not included, even though it's mostly apartment complexes. There's about 90% apartment there, and then my house is a single-family dwelling, which doesn't bother me. But I think I should be included because I'm not really adding to any more people than probably is already on that street, or the temporary nature of the people that live there now in apartments. Okay, the third point I want to talk to is the financial impact to both me and the city. So if we do a little bit of simple math and figure out that I rent the place 7 times a year for $3,200 a week, that gives taxes of about $2,200 to the city that I pay in my city fee. And also, it provides, with those 7 weeks a year, 10 people renting, eating every day at $15 a person, that's about $5,000 that is going into the restaurants, local restaurants, and helping them out. So please consider what I'm asking you to do, include me in the map and my property at 307 West Palizada. I'll continue to rent to families, keep
Okay.
the riffraff out.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cortez, do you currently have an STLU permit?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is TJ Orr, and I would like to ask Bill Christian and Jennifer Gillette to come up to speak.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for your service, folks, and especially on the holiday week. Best to you and yours. You know, I've spoken to you a few times about this before. We live at 205 Avenida Serra, right next to, behind the Cabrillo Playhouse. We are licensed STLU. It is our home, primary residence, full-time. And yeah, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we decided that we could afford the extra space in our home to have short-term lodging. It's been working out fine. As I said, I think primarily it's because we're there. Categorically, we are different, not to make a big deal about Anaheim, but we are different, we're there, and the first person to know about a problem would be me. I guess what I'm asking the city to consider is take into account those owner-occupied full-time homes. We are, I think, a different categorical breed than everything else that's going on. I do sympathize with the folks in the community who are having absentee owners, absentee managers. You know, I'm sorry that that is occurring. It's not my situation. We are able to maintain a very good environment, and I think we're good stewards of our community and representatives, ambassadors for San Clemente. We did have a nice meeting with Ms. Gallardo Daly some months ago, followed the ordinance rules about approaching her with our data on cost recovery and so on. And frankly, given the fact that we added the kitchen and so on, we are just now breaking even on what we invested. It is my retirement plan after 25 years with federal government to have this income, and it is important to us. So breaking even on our sunk cost isn't really why we got into this. I look for a extended amortization period. We talked about a decade, actually. So if you all allow that, I will invite you to my 75th birthday party, and I will let go of my STLU. Thanks a lot, folks.
Mr. Orr, you said you reside full-time at 205 Avenue Serra?
Yes, sir.
So that's a multi-unit dwelling?
No, it is not. Single-family home.
But, so that is your STLU?
Yes.
But you live there full-time?
I live there full-time. We created a studio apartment, basically.
In the back. Do you guys have an STLU permit, or do you have a STAR permit?
No, we have an STLU permit. We're not allowed to have, we aren't a multifamily dwelling, so we can't do the STAR.
Okay.
And I explored with Ms. Gallardo the costs of doing that to convert it to a full duplex situation. It's really not in the budget to go there. I'd have to create more parking spaces and everything else, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Bill Christian, followed by Jennifer Gillette, followed by Wade Thompson. And please, before you start speaking, I need the other 2 speakers to line up. That would be Jennifer Gillette, if you're here, and Wade Thompson. Are you here? Thank you. That's why they're not coming up. So then I would call up Monica Burek and Bernie Wolforth.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Bill Christian, and I live in Pasadena with my wife. We bought almost 6 years ago in San Clemente with the proceeds from my sale of my mother's house in Ocean City, New Jersey. We want to move here, but we're still employed, and it's impossible for us to commute from San Clemente to where we work. So, but we can only hold on to the house if we are able to do short-term rentals. We have a short-term rental permit. We've been very faithful about sending in the transit occupancy tax proceeds, and we really have depended on this revenue. We bought with the idea that this revenue would be allow us to hold on to this house until we were able to make the move down here. So I sympathize. I think this is a very controversial issue, but I do note on the city's sort of the information you provided that a lot of the problem is rooming houses rather than short-term rentals. On our street, there are probably a number. We live at 232 West Mariposa. Our house is at 232 West Mariposa. We've been very careful about who we select, just like the other gentleman that talked a minute ago. We don't allow any parties. We carefully screen our people. A lot of the people that come and rent our house for a short period of time are fathers, grandfathers, parents of Marines at Camp Pendleton. Other people are coming here for a family vacation in the summer for a week. So I think I looked at the zoning change that you made, and I was curious why that particular zoning change was made. It seems like it was fairly arbitrary, maybe to settle a lawsuit. But I do implore you to relook at whether or not we could, whether there will be a period of time to amortize our investment. If you gave us 10 years, that would be fine with us, and we would be able to survive with that period of time. So anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Wolforth, followed by Susan Nelson and Tricia Mading. If you would please come up.
Good evening, Council. My name is Bernie Wolfarth. I'm here tonight as a resident and not as a BPR commissioner. On May 3rd, 2016, this council passed an ordinance protecting our residential neighborhoods from businesses. Up until that point, many of us felt hopeless as hotels and hospitals were opening on every corner, bringing with them increased traffic, constant noise, unbearable secondhand smoke, loud music, profanity, trash, and a revolving door of strangers in a once peaceful community. This ordinance gave us hope, and many of us have been counting the days for the amortization period to be over and our neighborhoods to return to some sense of normalcy. The STLU ordinance is a good ordinance as it is. My neighborhood has benefited directly from it, and for that, thank you. It is my understanding that the council is considering extending that amortization period to 10 years, mostly because of concerns of litigation costs. Let me be clear. We want you to fight this fight. We want you to spend this money. The commercialization of our residential areas must stop. The owners of these businesses have had plenty of time to find alternative long-term renters, apply for permits, or secure locations within the appropriately zoned areas. Please do not extend this period. Council members Ham and Brown and Mayor Ward, thank you for voting in favor of this ordinance in May of last year. Please stay the course and uphold the ordinance you've already supported. Steve, you're not really looking at me or paying attention, but this is going to be your first opinion on this matter, at least in this official capacity. While you were running, you called the ordinance stupid. Maybe that's why you're not looking at me. I hope you will change your mind, as this is crucial for the quality of life of our residents. And Lori, you're the only member of the council who opposed this. If I remember correctly, it was because of the Coastal Commission. You wanted more time to understand it. But on June 27th, at my interview for BPR, you took time to thank me for helping to get this ordinance passed. Tonight I ask for more than a thank you. I ask you to uphold the ordinance with no extension as it stands. Please don't support the continual commercialization of our residential neighborhoods. I know each of you has a fiduciary responsibility to the people of San Clemente and that legal fees are higher than they have ever been, but don't stop defending what's right because of the associated costs. The people of San Clemente want you to fight for our homes, we want you to fight for our neighborhoods, and we want you to fight for the quality of our life. Please uphold this ordinance and do not extend the amortization period. Thank you.
Susan Nelson, followed by Tricia Mading, and then Joe Janis is after that, followed by Vicki Janis.
Hi, Susan Nelson, 20-year resident. I feel like this is Groundhog Day. We did this 2 years ago, went through all this stuff. I urge you, go back and look at all the YouTube videos. Look at all the arguments. They don't seem to have changed. It's all the same problems. Lafrano's correct. every time somebody pulls into the driveway, you get that anxiety of, are they going to be jerks? Are they going to be nice? Are they going to stand outside and smoke? And is it going to come into my house? We've had verbal confrontations in our front yard with these drunk, entitled people. I pay for this house. I pay way more for my house. The staff report says something about people coming in that code enforcement can't decipher between someone coming in with a casserole and a pillow. What does it matter? It's two people. The occupancy was supposed to be, you can have 6 of this house, you can have 8. It doesn't matter if it's daytime or nighttime, if they're staying the night or coming in. If they have a pillow, perhaps they're staying the night. If they're coming for a casserole, then maybe they're coming for a party, which also isn't allowed. It's an event, which is not allowed. Again, it is very frustrating to see this stuff. Parking, they want to include parking on the street. Oh, that's great. The more cars allowed to park on the street, then the more people are going to come. And then again, you're going to question the occupancy. The residents can park, but the STLU people can't. Well, that's because they're operating like a business with a business license. And licenses for business, aren't they required to provide on-site parking? So this amortization that we said, we'll give them 2 years. We've had 18 months. They haven't followed the rules. We see that, and you want to extend that. We don't have the code enforcement. The staff report talks about how wonderful the ordinance worked and how the code enforcement helped. Well, there were months that went by that we didn't have code enforcement. We didn't have evening people, we didn't have weekend people, and the residents were the one left to deal with that. We kept getting the reply email, we're close, we have people on, and it didn't happen. So the numbers on that chart are not correct, I will tell you. So the return on investment, we don't get our return on investment because you cut our time period short. Did that sound like someone that lives in San Clemente? No. That is an out-of-town investor here to make money, and they don't give one iota about this town. We do, and we're left to deal with the trash, the smoking, the parties, the drunk people. Please, take care of this. Protect your people. Uphold the zoning. Continue with the ordinance that you wrote. It was very well written. Do not extend this. 2 years we thought was too much. We've been dealing with this for 7. And the thought to do this for 17 years is beyond. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Madding, and I have lived in San Clemente for over 12 years. In May 2016, the City Council adopted the STLU ordinances, which provided the owners of non-conforming STLUs in single-family residential neighborhoods with a lengthy 2-year amortization period to wind down and close their commercial lodging businesses. The staff report now unbelievably recommends that the 2-year amortization period be extended by not just an additional 10-year period to all non-conforming STLU owners in quote-unquote good standing who apply, but also an additional discretionary 5-year period. The staff then defined in good standing as owners current on remittance TOT and with no violation of the municipal code that was not cured within 30 days of violation. The only non-conforming STLU owners who will not pass this quote-unquote test are people who owe money to San Clemente. In making this recommendation, the staff report cites the non-conforming STLU owner's argument that the 2-year amortization period unconstitutionally cut short their return on investment, and that the 2-year period is shorter than the amortization period San Clemente has applied to other non-conforming uses that became non-conforming through zoning enactments. This is not the correct test in determining whether an amortization period is reasonable. In determining whether an amortization period is reasonable, courts use a balancing test and weigh the value to the public in halting the non-conforming use against the private loss suffered as a result of the termination. Nowhere in the staff report, however, is the harm to residents from the many hotels in their neighborhoods even mentioned, especially given that the closer the non-conforming use is to a classic nuisance, the shorter their time the California courts require to meet business minimum fairness standards. Amortization allows an owner of a non-conforming use the opportunity to recoup some portion of his or her investment. It is not necessary for the owner's entire investment to be recouped at the end of the amortization period. Here, the owners of the non-conforming uses in single-family residential neighborhoods may suffer, at most, some economic loss when forced to terminate their commercial lodging businesses. They can continue to rent their homes, just not for periods shorter than 30 days. Everyday non-conforming owners, many hotel doors open. In single-family neighborhoods, however, the residents in these neighborhoods are forced to endure damaging negative impacts to their health, safety, general welfare, from, among other things, the loss to the quiet enjoyment of their residential neighborhoods because of the seemingly endless, loud, and disruptive parties, limited parking and increased beach traffic because of the lack of infrastructure in the neighborhoods, and the economic loss that they suffer from the decreased value to their homes because of the neighboring mini hotels and their transient lodges. Please protect our neighborhoods and accept the adopted ordinance. Thank you.
Hi, Council, Joe Janis. You know, the two individual guys that were here that have, the one from Pasadena and the gentleman over here, they should be allowed individually to come to talk to you people about a hardship and stuff, but it shouldn't be a blanket thing for everybody in the city that we're going to extend this thing 10 years. 15 years. Now I'll start my speech. 15 years or more, what fun we're going to have. Steve, you and I are going to be 80 years old by that time. This is a complete reversal of the intent of the original agreement. There are two sides involved here: vacation rental owners who are supported by the vacation industry, and our city residents. The negotiations were one-sided. City residents were not represented. We have been absolutely blindsided by this staff report. We don't agree with the findings and recommendations of the report. Code enforcement has not been effective as the report indicated. I know there's been vacancies in the department, and the department heads and managers have been scrambling to fill these positions. Last month, I sent enforcement a list of the last 6 months of complaints that we've had, and I got a response last week. And I think you can see it on the board there. There were 12 complaints. They're listed in purple. The responses, were in blue and red. There were 11 complaints. 8 of the 11 complaints were no one was available to respond, and 3 of them that they didn't get the report because there was a mix-up between the answering service and us. So that's 11 for 11, 100% failure rate. This is not being effective at all. We're very worried if you pass this that code enforcement cannot enforce this. Other cities have told us they're not enforceable. Last year when code enforcement did respond, we heard things like, we can't go inside and determine the occupant load or the parking. And that was the end of the conversation. The statistics in the staff report aren't accurate at all. It appears the staff report was only written in an attempt to justify the deal struck with the plaintiffs of this lawsuit. No other city has suggested such a thing. If you recall, in 2016, a petition was with over 800 signatures were presented by us that indicated 94% of the residents didn't want these in our neighborhoods. You guys responded by passing this ordinance. Yes, we know the Alliance has filed a lawsuit, and it's going to cost us some bucks. But the sentiment out there, we don't want these things in our neighborhoods. So the fact is, we were not included in these negotiations. It's unconscionable and a slap in the face to us. This is a terrible deal for our residents in our neighborhoods. Don't sell us out. Thanks.
Next speaker is Vicki Janis, and I would ask Ed Efron and Mark McGuire and Christy Dassonville to please come up.
Hi, I'm Vicki Janis, and I live across the street with my husband from, I think, one of the largest STLUs in San Clemente. And we get a lot of parking on the street. This summer was a lot better because they were told that they had to park on site. Citations were never written for parking because the code enforcement officers were worried about their officers being confronted by the vacation renters. 1:30 in the morning on a hot August night, I don't get upset very often, but I couldn't sleep because people across the street were sitting on their balcony talking like they were broad daylight on the beach, and I went over in my sweatshirt and flip-flops and said, "Excuse me, I can't sleep. I'm hearing every word of your conversation a lady in the house came out and said, "What the F?" And I said, just take it inside. And they don't want to talk inside the house because they disturb the people in the house that are sleeping. So what about us that live across the street and we have no way to get out? We don't have air conditioning. So we've had all kinds of problems with the STLUs, but the big thing that has saved us, they claim that there's been 2 that have been shut down, and it was because of parking violations. So can't we enforce parking? There's a couple of pictures of all the cars on the street that we saw. And some of these you can see red Solo cups parked on top of all the cars, and they're not drinking Coke. Cars are parked going the wrong way. We play with our grandkids in the street. We play stickball, and cars come crashing up, screeching to a halt. So it's just our safe little neighborhood. Our dream home isn't so safe anymore. So the bottom line is, what's more important to you and to San Clemente as council members is the safety and well-being of our neighborhoods, or the special interest groups that are trying to profit from them? I would love to open a wedding venue to generate some revenue in my home, a billiards parlor maybe in my garage, perhaps coffee drive-up, let them honk one time, because that's the same sound we hear when they unlock their cars at 2 in the morning. But we won't do that because we like to play by the rules. Please enforce our zoning laws. Thank you.
Mr. Efron, followed by Mark McGuire, if he's still here.
Good evening. My name is Ed Efron, and I'm an 18-year resident of San Clemente, and I happen to live right across the street from the Janices and right next door to a vacation rental. I've enjoyed my home for the first 7 years, and then I had to go up to Northern California for 10 years to take care of my ailing mom, and while working in the Silicon Valley. After my mom passed 2 years ago, and realizing I've worked for 37 years in a very high-stress Silicon Valley, it was time to retire and come back to my beautiful home in San Clemente. And when I did, I realized now I have a vacation rental right next door. And literally within maybe the first or second night, there was loud noise and partying late at night, and this has gone on for a long time. There would be times I'd have a relative or friend come and stay at my house, and I think, as all of you might have had people say at your house, one of the first things you asked the next morning was, "Hey, how did you sleep?" And the answer is always, "I don't know, it was so loud next door I couldn't fall asleep." Those are the kind of answers that I get when I want to show my beautiful home. Well, I've used code enforcement maybe 4 or 5 times. One of the times when I called, the answer was, "Oh, I'm so sorry, our computer's down. Really can't do much." I go, "Well, can you jot it down on a piece of paper so that you could at least record the complaint?" "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea." Anyway, to make a long story short, based on the report from code enforcement, it seems like hardly any of the complaints have been recorded. So I don't know what the code enforcement department is doing, but it's not effective. I think as a homeowner, you have the right for peace and privacy to enjoy your own home. I think that's frankly a real estate law, and that's not happening. I can't enjoy my own home now that I'm retired. I think one of the earlier speakers spoke and looked at all of you and said, "Would you like a vacation rental next to your home?" The answer is no. I can answer that for you. So I would appreciate if you enforce your original decision and let us enjoy our home, and that's really what I have to say.
Mayor, ward members of the council, Mark McGuire, San Clemente resident. I don't have a rental, and I don't have any right next door to me, but I have a specific comment and then a couple of general comments. The specific comment relates to the area that you're contemplating expanding to allow potential STLUs. And in the North Beach area, I saw that it doesn't include the old skate rink and the self-storage that is behind El Camino Real next to the skate rink, and then there's one more property back there. Those areas have a mixed-use overlay, just like the rest of the area that you're proposing the STLU. They're designated industrial right now, but they have this mixed-use overlay, and so the thought that I had was that that would be an appropriate place, that if they ended up doing mixed-use properties there or commercial properties there, that you would potentially allow STLUs in that area as well. It's not next to a residential neighborhood or anything else. It seems consistent with what you're proposing in terms of where you would allow these STLUs. So it goes back to that, that the fact that if you put the mixed-use overlay there, the same logic applies for the STLUs. The general comment I have is that I know this is an incredibly complicated issue, and I know that you've been dealing with a lawsuit, and you've gone over this thing a million ways from Sunday. And yet you're not done with it because, you still got to go through the Coastal Commission process. The Coastal is going to stick their nose under this tent and be involved in it, and they're going to push on the side of wanting more STLUs and more places where you can have STLUs, but they also recognize that it can be incompatible with neighborhood compatibility and peace and quiet. So they juggle it, but they put their hand a little bit on the scale of increasing the STLUs. So I guess I would, with that in mind, I would say that please try to think as hard as you can where you can find these to be appropriate uses if they're properly regulated. And then where they're not appropriate, I guess what I would say is I don't understand this notion of amortizing for upwards of 15 years, that if they weren't appropriate to begin with, and it wasn't a question of this was allowed and now we're eliminating it. It was unclear whether they were allowed, and you made a compromise of a 2-year amortization, and now all of a sudden there's this concept of proposing upwards of 15 years of amortization. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it is a type of punting of the issue or a deferral that could really create problems where all of a sudden you have these grandfathered in 15-year STLUs in areas that you're saying are not appropriate for STLUs. So I know that means you have to grapple with the tough issue. The last thing I would say is maybe you can get a standstill on the litigation while you grapple the issue with Coastal, and maybe that'll get you closer to a resolution that you have to do anyway to resolve issues with Coastal. Stand still the litigation, don't spend any money, see where you come out, and see if you can come to a compromise at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Dassenfill, and then our last speaker is Chris Thornburg, and I'd ask if you would come up.
Hi, I'm a longtime resident of San Clemente, nearly 30 years. I live on Valencia, and I also have a rental unit right next to me. And on the other side of that is an STLU. And my rental person is a monthly rental, which is allowed by the zoning, and that person is constantly in jeopardy because of the STLU that's adjacent to it, because they are irritated as much as we are with these STLUs. So my income with that rental property is in jeopardy just because of this other situation that's going on. So I know in making the decision, it's probably more factual information for you than it is feeling. So I apologize, I only found out about this meeting a few hours ago, so I don't have all the ordinances. But I'm just going to read a few statements then. My rights as a homeowner supposedly are guaranteed under the zoning and ordinances that are in place right now, and they have been in place for decades. So single-family housing is not transient housing. As homeowners, I have the right to rent on a monthly basis, and I do so, and I make money on that. So I'm trying to understand why someone who wants to have a STLU is more entitled to making more money than I am in the place where I live. Let's see, STLUs are a business. They are becoming a business. And as a single-family residential living area where I'm at, it is not a business. It's the act and enjoyment of peaceful living, and is also guaranteed in our ordinances. It's your job to protect that right just as much as it is any other. I've endured years of harassment by STL users. My privacy has been invaded. There are constant parking issues. I have drones that are videotaping inside of my house, inside of my bedroom, inside of my bathroom by people who are STLU users. And in order to do this, I've got to call the cops, and the cops have to show up for me to file a complaint because your complaint system is not set in place. That needs to be done. I'm trying to figure out why we're changing ordinances and zonings to cater to recent property owners who do not live here versus those who have lived here forever. If there are issues to settle lawsuits for prospective business owners, who's going to protect the rightful homeowner who's been here for years? Also, somebody mentioned that a lot of these renters in these STLUs do events like weddings. We've had all kinds of weddings, bachelor parties, things like that. Don't they have to have permits to have those events at those places in addition to the STLUs? And that's not happening. There are more ordinances protecting the long-term homeowner than there are protecting the STLU users. So I just want you to take a look at that and consider that. Thank you.
Chris Thornburg, followed by Wayne Eggleston, followed by Jim Laurent. And I'd ask you to please come up.
Mayor, council members, good evening. I'm also a 30-year resident of San Clemente. I live on West Avenida, Valencia. I'm one of those homeowners who actually had a neighbor's STLU revoked recently. And thank goodness, it was a mess down there. For 5 years, I have endured significant problems with an STLU near my home on West Avenida, Valencia. Weddings, all-night parties, profanity, yelling, screaming, singing, drinking games, loud music, tributes on public address systems, blatant use of street parking, weddings, bar mitzvahs, a drone twice peering into my bedroom window. These are just some of the complaints I and my neighbors made regarding this STLU. The noise equipment of trucks, yard cleaning crews, and carpet cleaning crews often disrupted these after-party mornings as the STLU readied for brand-new guests. This is something we really don't think about, is all the cleanup crews that come in after these people, after they've been there 2 days prior to block the driveways and take up most of the parking on the street. It's often that the parking up and down the street, both sides, is completely parked out as if it were the 4th of July. So anybody who decides to come to my house to park would have to park in my driveway. Not uncommon at all, and you guys have a photo records of a lot of these parking problems that we've had. After years of complaint, the city only recently took action and revoked this STLU's homeowner's license, but my neighbors and I have endured 5 years of abuse before this happened. The STLU owner at their recent hearing claimed they'd been doing this for 17 years. So city code enforcement employees were unable to document most complaints because, by their own admission, they were understaffed, they prioritized other duties, or they had no after-hours employees to cite violations. And obviously on weekends and the evenings is when most of these violations occur. I'm sure you know this well. So you're beginning to hear a theme here that we try to complain, and those complaints either go ignored or they go unanswered. I feel lucky that the code enforcement addressed my situation. I feel sorry for all these other people who are dealing with the same thing that I did. There was and still is a poor system of sharing information with the Sheriff's Department. Contacting the STLU's management company, as proposed in the first ordinance, is absurd. These people exist to protect the STLU owners' interests and their own interests. They profit from this, so why on earth would they say anything detrimental about the STLU? Because of these problems, few code enforcement citations are issued, although infractions are abundant. It took 5 years of complaining for this STLU to acquire the 3 strikes necessary to revoke a license. This is another thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. It can take 20, 30, 40 complaints to get 1 strike. So this whole idea of bad apples are going to get pushed out, it's just not true. Because of the city's inadequate staffing and poorly structured STLU complaint protocol, once quiet neighborhoods across San Clemente suffer each time a van full of neighbors drives to the neighborhood for a beach party. May I say one more thing before I go? The U.S. Census Bureau in 2016 shows San Clemente's population at just over 65,000 people. Tonight's agenda report states that there are 225 registered STLUs in San Clemente. Some of them are people that own multiple STLUs. Why all this fuss? Why should we change our zoning laws? Why are 65,000 people living in this town required to change their historic zoning laws to give up quiet neighborhoods in favor of wild parties and parking problems, and do so in order to accommodate the business and profitability of only 225 STLU owners? So thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Mr. Eggleston? Jim Laurent is our last speaker.
I have some questions that I'd like the City Council to answer after in your deliberations. There are times in the history of any city that have fundamental core issues that are worth fighting for. Quality of life issues. Take, for example, sober living homes or the toll road. These are lawsuits which are also fundamental core issues. And that means elected representatives need to represent the residents who live here over the interest of the vacation rental industry and the nearly 50% of vacation owners who live outside of San Clemente. Some Forester Ranch and selective vacation renters do not even live in San Clemente. Why represent them? It is essential to maintain the integrity and safety of single-family neighborhoods, and we need to fight for that and not be bullied by the lawyers of vacation rental owners. Residents move into single-family neighborhoods because they are single-family residences to raise their children in a safe family environment. They expect that their single-family neighborhoods will remain single-family and not be commercialized into hotel zones. And that is worth fighting for, even if that means the city fight in a court of law against the lawsuit that we have now. San Clemente has a history of citizens taking action in their own hands through a ballot process and suing the city over the outlet freeway signs, open space, and development on city-owned beach property. All of these cases, the residents won overwhelmingly in the ballot box or in the courts. I don't think we want to have that happen again. The City Council needs to do the right thing and represent their own residents in single-family neighborhoods instead of representing vacation rental attorneys as presented in the staff report. This issue is worth fighting for. It is a fundamental core issue of San Clemente quality of living. The history of single-family neighborhoods depends upon the city doing the right thing to protect the vast majority of single-family residents who they represent. As a real estate appraiser, we are given instructions by banks that if we are aware of some problems in the neighborhood, functional type of problems in the neighborhood, we are to report that on an appraisal report. And then the bank will decide whether they're going to loan on it through refinancing or a sale. Recently did an appraisal in Forester Ranch. STLU, this property was not registered, did not have a permit. But I had to put that in the appraisal report, that in fact there was a vacation rental on that property. Please stay the course. We went through it, the Planning Commission went through 10 meetings in order to get this ordinance. Please stay the course. Thank you.
What am I doing here? Well, I'm number 2 of the 2 that got revoked. The property I had next to me was a nightmare. I'm not going to reiterate everything Mr. Thornburg said because that would be wasting time, and I don't want to waste your time. But why are we wasting time with this now? Why are we looking at this thing again? You spent so much time as a council, planning commission. We had both sides throw out all their arguments, and we came up with an ordinance that had some teeth to it, we thought, and that's another reason why I'm standing up here. The teeth to it is exactly what you're trying to rip out, or what's being proposed to be ripped out. The way the property next door to me got removed was because of parking. It wasn't because I was getting woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning time and time and time again. It wasn't because they had parties time and time again. It's because they had too many cars in the street, and that was the only thing we could get the Sheriff Department and Code Compliance to actually write a violation on. I had no trouble with parking. I had trouble with the noise. So if you rip out the parking, what's that going to do? I can guarantee you, your problem properties are going to continue. You're going to continue to affect the neighborhoods. Why are we trading one lawsuit for another? Because I know I'm angry. My problem was solved, I thought. But I didn't come up here for me. I came up for all the other people next to these properties. They're a nightmare. We know it. We know it. Who is the Short-Term Vacation Rental Alliance? Property managers? No agenda there. Out-of-towners that bought a property because they saw a quick buck in our town. Don't sell out the neighborhoods, the people that volunteer, for people that are just taking from the community. Every one of my family volunteers for things in this community. Friends of San Clemente, Ed Foundation. And we're getting sold out because someone is making a profit in our neighborhood. Our quality of life was terrible. I can't stress it enough. Why are we even putting this in front of the Planning Commission again? Like Wayne said, 10 meetings? I was at half a dozen of them. The other side had its say, we had its say, and you guys came up with a solid thing. Keep it. Thank you.
That was our last speaker. However, I have a few cards. Deb Jackson does not wish to speak. She is opposed. No extension. Don't change parking. Jeff Grant does not wish to speak. No STLU extension in residential low. Enough. Debbie Porter does not wish to speak. No extension. Keep parking the same. We are done. I think this is L. Beverge. I'm not sure. I'm not saying this right. Residents since 1980, please put our residents first, not these profiteers. Do not extend their time. Enough is enough. Mike Boshier, opposed to proposed amendment. Do not extend amortization period. Leave parking ordinance as is. Tish Colburn, stay within current regulations. No extension, no street parking. Wade Thompson, I oppose any extended amortization period of STLUs in residential low neighborhoods. Can't read it. Ordinances as is, leave ordinance as is and preserve current zoning. Jennifer Gillette, opposed, stay the course, no extension, don't change parking. Monica Burek, opposed, do not extend amortization, 2 years is enough. Chad Nelson, oppose extended amortization of STLU ordinance, oppose proposed parking amendment. Why remove one part of ordinance that is actually enforceable? So that is it for the public comment. So I would ask staff then to come up. Oh, we have another one? Okay. One last one. Joseph Giles. Yes. And then we're going to close that.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. 10 years ago, my wife and I were called away from Southern California. We had to suffer in Baltimore, Maryland. For 10 years, I swore we were coming back to San Clemente. Thank you for your service. Thank you for providing a city that we could come home to. We did our due diligence when we purchased our house in late 2016. We were concerned about an Airbnb rental that currently goes for over $900 a night, allowing 12 people just up the road from us. We did our due diligence and we found the ordinance. We saw the 2-year amortization period. We thought that was pretty cool because it allowed people that maybe thought they got the rug pulled out from underneath them time to get out of the short-term rental business. I like the idea of resident owners. I'm okay with that, but stay the course. Stay the course. The ordinance you put together was good, it was brilliant, and it served the people of this community, and it gave us a reason to come back. Thank you. Please stay the course.
Okay. So I'd ask staff to come up because we had a few questions. And Scott, you might have to help me. Some of them we may not be able to answer.
And
I'll let you know.
just to clarify, that what we are being asked to do tonight, we're not being asked to change the ordinance. We're being asked to direct council or planning commission to consider some changes. So
That's
there's no
correct.
changes being approved or disapproved tonight.
That's correct. This is a request for the city council to initiate some amendments to the short-term lodging unit ordinance. If the council were to initiate it, it would be referred to the planning commission, and the planning commission would have a public hearing and make a recommendation back to the city council.
Okay. But there's nothing tonight that we cannot make our own decision. We don't have to send this everything down to the planning commission unless we do make a change. Is that correct? Unless we change, we recommend changing something to the ordinance, then we would send that change to the planning commission for deliberation.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. On occupancy, is occupancy, is that the amount of people that can be in a home or spending the night?
The way the current STLU ordinance is written, occupancy means the vacation renter and their guests. So the regulations now tie occupancy to parking. So based on the number of legal on-site parking spaces, that's the maximum number of renters and guests that can be at the vacation rental.
Okay. So when
Sorry,
someone said
it's
that was the-
overnight guests, not just guests for dinner or.
No, it's
in the
the
house?
overnight renters and their guests.
Okay.
Because it says +2, so we always assumed that was a guest. 2 per bedroom +2. Is that the guest?
The 2 per bedroom +2 was the original regulation that we put forward to the city council early on when we were making changes to Title III and transit occupancy. When we went through the process of changing the zoning ordinance to comprehensively address transient lodging, we changed occupancy for short-term lodging units to tie it specifically to parking. The recommendations that are before you tonight would uncouple occupancy and parking. One of the recommendations, as you've heard tonight, is to not limit STLU to parking on site, but allow STLUs to park on a public street. With that proposed change, we would still want to regulate occupancy, and the recommendation is to go back to the occupancy in the previous ordinance, which is 2 persons per bedroom plus 2 more. So if you had a 3-bedroom home for rent, you could have 8 occupants or 8 guests in that home. But at no time, no matter how many bedrooms, occupancy is not to exceed 10. If someone wanted to exceed 10 occupants in a 5 or 6 bedroom vacation rental, they would have to request a waiver from the occupancy requirements from the community development director.
Okay. All right, thanks for making that clear. Do we allow any events, weddings at STLUs?
No,
currently?
the current regulations do not allow any type of special events.
Okay. So the public does need to know that that is not allowed, and we did that in the original ordinance. The issue of complaints not being registered, not having staff, not having nighttime personnel or weekend, it's probably fair to say that we haven't been able to verify every complaint. But are we, what I want to know is, are we fully staffed now?
Yeah, it took us a while to get fully staffed and to get a weekend code compliance officer on board and fully trained. That has since occurred, so we are fully staffed, and we do have weekend code enforcement Thursday through Sunday evenings from 2 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Okay. Another question, are we unable to go inside to verify the occupancy?
I'm going to let Adam Atamian, our code compliance manager, talk about some of the challenges with verifying occupancy.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. Adam Atamian, Code Compliance Manager. The occupancy when we get a complaint about occupancy, as there's too many people in the property, we do not have immediate rights of entry per se. However, what we are able to do is contact property managers and request to verify what is occurring on site. A lot of times we can see how many people are at the property, if we can see them coming and going. There are ways to deal with this, and we have addressed this in the past. In some instances, we do get complaints of over-occupancy, and we show up and there are as many people as are allowed in the property. I wouldn't say that we have an issue with verifying occupancy. Most of the complaints, though, are not generally about occupancy. They're about impacts to neighborhoods, and those would come in the form of parking or trash or loud and unruly parties, those types of things.
Okay. Can you talk about challenges of verifying parking and the issues that the city has? Can we verify parking?
Yes, so in order to verify parking, especially we're talking about parking off-site, the issue there is tying a vehicle to the actual property. So a lot of times we have out-of-town guests, out-of-state guests. The presence of out-of-state license plates do not give us the evidence that stands up to scrutiny. We need to identify that the person who's driving that vehicle, who has charge of that vehicle, is staying at the vacation rental. And we've been successful on that a number of times, but if there's nobody at the property and there's just a car out on the street, then it requires us to do a lot of research, and we don't always verify every single complaint, because most of them are ephemeral, meaning they only occur for a short amount of time and then they disappear. So we have to observe it, we have to document it, and then when we do, we issue citations.
But we have to verify it when we document it, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is some challenges with the parking. What about our system of reporting and complaint protocol? Do we need to revamp that? Have you found that that is inadequate?
I've spoken with some of the members of the public that have discussed the issues with reporting. I know there was one time where there was the answering service system was down. The other times where complaints were reported that are not in our system, I'm not really sure what happened there. We get about 2,500 complaints a year. I don't hear this very often, and I'm assuming that this is not really not a normal occurrence. At least I don't hear a lot of complaints like this frequently.
Okay. Now, I have a whole list of questions from Wayne, but I'm not sure that we can get to all of those. That's true. You know what, Scott, we'll talk about, when it comes up, we can talk about CEQA, I think. Let's see if there's anything in here that I can answer. Okay, so what I'll do, your questions about providing what other cities have done with STLUs and what case law, we can try and find that out for you and get that to you. The only question that I had that maybe staff could answer, this one I did not understand. How would Coastal Commission view these new proposals in as much as parking in visitor serving areas would be more impacted due to street parking? So how would the Coastal Commission, in your view that? If we're proposing vacation rentals in visitor serving areas and there will be less parking for the public to access the beach?
Well, I can't address that specific issue with regard to parking and the Coastal Commission. In our discussions with the Coastal Commission about the existing ordinance, the Coastal Commission has acknowledged that we have taken sort of a hybrid approach. We haven't banned it completely as some coastal cities have. We have allowed it in some areas, and they recognize that there are challenges to sort of the commercialization in the residential areas, and they also want to preserve residential units for long-term residents of a community and not turn it all over to vacation renters. So in our conversations with the Coastal Commission on our land use plan, they have acknowledged that the city did take a good approach, and if anything, they would look to have the city perhaps expand some of the areas where we have allowed short-term lodging units.
Does any other council have questions of staff? Go ahead.
My first was the Coastal Commission. So we have gotten feedback from them on this ordinance, and their direction is incorporated into your staff report?
No, the Coastal Commission has not weighed in on our ordinance specifically. Right now, we are working with the Coastal Commission on our land use plan, so we're just developing with them policies within the coastal zone. The second phase of our work with the Coastal Commission will be something called the implementation plan, and that's when they will look at the zoning. So for now, they have acknowledged that we will regulate short-term lodging units, and they are okay with us and our ability to regulate them. When we hand over our zoning ordinance and we hand over our short-term lodging unit regulations, that's when they will dive into the details and may have some things to say about how we permit them or where we permit them.
And what's the approximate timeline on that?
You know, we are looking to go to Coastal Commission with our land use plan preliminarily for discussion purposes in December, and then in hopefully February of 2018 for final action, and that's just the land use plan. The second phase of the implementation program could take another, maybe another year to 18 months beyond that. So I think we're looking at about maybe 2 years.
Okay. And then Senate Bill 1069, which is the Granny Flat legislation that was passed this year. How does what we're contemplating tonight in terms of timing dovetail, if at all, with the city's changes in residential ordinances that come from that? For example, the parking.
You know, I may need some help from Amber and Scott to answer this question, but the state law doesn't allow us to require parking for these accessory dwelling units. So that's not something under the new legislation. When we talked about the accessory dwelling units with the city council a month or two ago, we made assurances to the city council that the accessory dwelling unit regulations wouldn't conflict with the STLU regulations. So to the extent that a property in a residential area or single-family residential area could develop an accessory dwelling unit, that accessory dwelling unit would not be allowed to turn into a short-term lodging unit if a short-term lodging unit were not allowed there to begin with.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the sixth speaker, Ms. Nelson, said your numbers were not correct. Can you talk us through how you came to putting together it's attachment 3, which talks about the complaints received and the cases opened?
Sure, I'm going to let Adam answer that question.
Okay. Specifically looking at, I'm assuming
Attachment 3, yeah.
The 2 boxes at the bottom. So those numbers were generated by looking at our project tracking software. It's an electronic database of all of our complaints. Every complaint that we receive is logged into that system. It turns into a case if it's reporting an actual violation. All of our notices of correction and citations, that's just going through all of our records. You know, identifying what citations were issued for what. This was actually, staff did a lot of this, has done a lot of this research over the past few months, just in anticipation of the 18-month, as well as some other tie-ins with some of our other performance measures and things like that. So these numbers have been gone over multiple times in multiple iterations. Issues with complaints received, that one's a little bit more difficult. That's putting in terms that people use when they describe a vacation rental complaint. So if they don't say vacation rental, STLU, vacationers, something to that effect, and they just say loud party, there's no guarantee that they're actually complaining about a vacation rental. So if anything, that number is a little low, and we may have gotten more complaints. But like all complaints, we do follow up to the best of our ability as staffing allows.
Okay, so you're pretty confident that these are, to the best possible ability, accurate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, he said the ones were low.
Well, what does that tell you? That it's inaccurate, it's data.
Okay, I think we got that. We understand that. We know. Lori, did you have any more questions?
No, but I did want to clarify, Mr. Lafrano, at the beginning, when he was reporting on my voting the last time around, if you'll remember, if you look at the tape, I asked my colleagues to bifurcate the vote, and they didn't give me that courtesy, and so that was the driver for why I voted the way I did, in addition to waiting for Coastal Commission input.
Steve, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. First of all, just to lay things in order, and clear a little bit on my position. I felt personally that when this was being put together, that I didn't like how it was being done, this ordinance, and that I prefer to have a specific ordinance specifically for the short-term rentals only, and that I want to address them each as a business and make them treat it as a business, make them be responsible as a business, and don't allow any violations for them to stay in business. I mean, that was the concept. It was the concept is, you know, if they're going to have a good neighbor policy and they're going to enforce it, and we're not going to overload a neighborhood, and basically they should be invisible to their neighbors as far as whether they're people that are living there all the time or if they're just visitors. And that was always the concept that I had. And I just thought at times, certain times it didn't go far enough. Is there a way, while we're looking at this, to come up with a way that we can be more stringent on people qualifying to even have one of these, operate one of these things? Two, I want them, anyone that's operating these, they're making money on it, they should be paying the tab for enforcement. So I'd want to monetize it, and then I'd want, you know, things like were brought up for right of entry. That should be part of the agreement. You want to be able to operate this? Well, we want to be able to go in there and inspect it anytime we want. So we should, and the number of guests should be hammered on each individual permit, should have a number of guests right on it in bold red print, so that we are all understanding what's going on. We should not be allowing an invasion in our communities, residential communities, that to interrupt our residential community. But on the other hand, there are some good actors out there. There are some good people that they take care of the property, they enforce it, they make sure they live there while the other person is visiting there, whatever that might be. If the neighbors don't know that it's a vacation rental and they're being followed, we shouldn't get in front of that. In other words, we should allow there be some commerce to people coming in and enjoying our city and spending their money in our city, coming in and visiting for other events. So I'm just wondering how we could, as part of this review that we're looking to do, you know, really isolate and make it very difficult for them to not play by the rules, and to make it very easy for the city and enforcement to shut them down if they don't. I mean, that's basically it. I want it to cost them money. I want them to fund the cost of enforcement. I want that to be paid for out of the people that are running these operations. And then I want to be draconian when it comes to enforcement, and regulation. So I don't know if that can be worked in as you guys are going to be reviewing this or not.
Can I ask you a question? When you talk about cost them money, are you talking about fining them?
I'm
Where there's
I'm
fines?
talking about them having to actually pay the city. We come up with a formula that what we know is going to cost us.
For inspections or whatever?
For inspections, inspection fees, permit fees, all that kind of stuff, besides the fines. Fines, we end up in now another court situation, but I want to do this up front. I want to load everything up front. This is what you're agreeing to do, this is what you have to do, and we want you to know you're going to get your neighbors to sign off on this, and they're going to have the phone number that if you screw up, you're done, it's out, it's no more. Anyway, that's...
Yeah. If I can, Mayor and Councilmember, when we were in mediation about this, that was a series of suggestions that the judge, who, by the way, it was court-ordered mediation, the judge assigned was going right down that pathway, suggesting that we look about being aggressive, getting cost recovery from these, and especially landing hard on violators and disturbers. And so from the things you've mentioned, except for the right entry, I think that's all fair game in terms of setting up the regulatory scheme, the licensing, the information requested, and the fees to cover the full cost of services that you could look at. We do have, coming back to you, it doesn't have to go to council, but there are modifications to Title III that in the course of the year we've wanted to make. They relate to licensing and operation. We can certainly include those concepts in that package when we come back.
Thank you.
Okay, so Scott, that would be more of a staff internal thing and not something sent to the planning commission?
Well, the planning commission has to consider amendments to Title 17, the zoning ordinance, and the operational and licensing parts of this. We're challenged by the litigation, don't get me wrong there, but they reside in Title III and can be dealt with separately. Some of the things you've mentioned have been proposed by the opposing side in the litigation that they're willing to step up to, and so, of course, we can explore those as part of the Title III package when that comes back.
All right, well, we'll get into that a little bit later then.
I got some questions. Cecilia, can you talk to me a little bit about our density percentages? What's currently allowed, and will we be making any modifications to those?
Let's see, we do have, I'm going to look to my staff here. I know we have percentages of stars and STLUs, or is it just stars? Just the STLUs, that we allow within the areas in which they're permitted. Those percentages don't change.
In the new recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, Lori?
So, this notion of teeth and the 15 years versus the 2 years, can you talk to us about 15 years? Where did that come from?
Well, it's really not 15 years. The current period is 2 years. The recommendation that was forwarded by the judge to us, to you, was that augment to 10 years total. If you have a complete sparkling bill of health, you can apply at the end of the 10 for 5 more. So that's how you get to, it can aggregate at 15. What the thinking was there and the premise there was that there can be investments made. Well, first off, there is no use in the San Clemente Municipal Code that has to be amortized ever, except for 2. And both of those amortization periods were written into these ordinances. So the one we're talking about is the 2-year one, but that jumps out at you and at the court in comparison to forever for everything else, no matter how noxious the use. And I don't mean to belittle or demean the adjacencies that have been mentioned today, but it is striking that no use ever has to be amortized in San Clemente except for these. And 2 years is awfully quick to recoup your investment, if you made it, to make the home into a vacation rental. So that was, I don't know if you're asking me the argument, but that's it, Councilmember Donchek. The argument was that that capitalization and that investment can't be recouped in just 24 months.
And was that a directive, or it feels like 2 is too short, and so somebody just said 10 plus 5. Was there
It was a matter
principled
of, in the
discussion
mediation, it was
behind
a
that?
matter of give and take, and that was it. Now, to take advantage of that, you have to have no strikes, and you have to come in a very short period, show that, and request an extended amortization. There is a safety valve already in it, as was mentioned previously, and we thought that was satisfactory, but that's left to the judgment, in their eyes, the whim of the city, and that's why that remained a point that was challenged.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So if there's no more questions, I'll kick off this discussion.
Okay, but my preference was to go through each one of these one at a time? Okay.
That's great.
So if you're going
I
to
think
do it
that's a
that
good
way,
idea.
I'm fine.
So let me just start by saying I think opening this back up is a can of worms, and it's a horrible idea. I don't think it's a good idea at all. But that being said, I recognize that there's always a middle ground that we should work towards, and I think I may have some ideas that get us close to an acceptable middle ground. The first thing is I think with what Mayor Ward just said is we need to go through these and create what I would call a box for each one of these recommendations that the Planning Commission could live within. I don't think it's fair to send back with just generalizations of what our expectations should be. They can be very finite. The first one is kind of overarching before we get into the single ones I think that would address many of the concerns that we have here this evening, is that we make 0 changes to residential low zoning. So it's status quo for the existing STLU ordinances as it pertains to residential low zoning.
And that would include amortization.
Yeah, 0 changes to residential low housing. My first recommendation.
So that's your first suggestion?
Yeah, so that's an overarching one before we get into
Okay.
the nuts and bolts of these, 4 points here. I think that solves a lot of issues and concerns that we heard this evening. I think that addresses a lot of the concerns that we as a council had previously, and I just think it's good policy and practice. Yeah.
Single-family homes.
I hate to tell you this, but yeah, you're not in residential low, so you're going to be happy with this recommendation. So first off, residential low,
And
no
just for
changes.
clarification, of the licenses that are out there, how many are in residential low, roughly? There's,
I'm being told it's about 150.
so half?
Yeah.
Half,
Yeah,
okay.
a little more than
Okay.
half.
Okay, so that being said, now everybody's clear on that issue. Does anyone have any discussion points on that? Or any concerns? Oh, you want to go through the whole thing and then come back?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to see if I agree or disagree.
Okay, the next one is or number 1 is STLU on-street parking. After having many discussions with the city attorney, I think this is one of those ones that we're not going to be able to get out of. And so what my recommendation would be, in conjunction with this recommendation as it stands exactly, is that we implement parking permit processes in all these zones, similar to what we have on the Lobiera-Montalvo Loop, currently existing, and very similar to what we just approved to move forward with in the North Beach area.
So you're suggesting what staff said, the only way to objectively enforce these policies would be through a residency-based permit system?
Yes.
Okay. So that is in lieu of trying to figure out the on-street parking and occupancy?
Yep.
Okay.
And funny thing, you should bring that up. I wrote up in my notes that we should determine how many parked cars could be on each unit, and actually physically issue them physical permits that have to be displayed in the car.
Yeah.
So that we can then identify if a car belongs to a neighbor or belongs to someone in that house.
Okay.
So in doing
Then
some
you
research on
agree.
this, so what's been approved in other communities, I have some friends live in Santa Monica, and every residential unit gets 2 parking passes. And that's if you have guests, if you're a permanent resident, whatever, you get 2. And that's just the way it is. Everything else is 2-hour parking. So I think that alleviates a lot of the issues we heard with parking.
Huntington Beach, I think, in their visitor serving does the same thing.
Okay.
So is there a way to make that revenue neutral undertaking by the city, that the cost for putting these programs together is borne by the STLUs in the different neighborhoods?
And the permits.
Yeah, the whole
Shouldn't it
bit, the
be-
whole program would be revenue
Right.
neutral for the city.
Which I think is
Yeah.
city regulation anyway. We make all of our permits, all of our staff time has to be paid for.
We can look at that. Some of these might need to be shared pro rata But if they relate directly to the rental activity.
I don't remember what we're charging our residents on Lobie or Montalvo, but it's pretty nominal fee. It's for the cost of the sticker plus the time for someone to issue the sticker.
The administration, okay.
So that's that one.
What about number 2?
So number 2, I just want to add the caveat in here because this is pretty loosely written, that we incorporate and maintain our distance requirements. So it doesn't say anything about that in there, but I'm not going to entertain any discussion about decreasing the distance or density requirements for stars. So very clearly, I think it's at 300 feet. Does that sound right to say? So currently it's 300 feet between every star. I think we maintain that. We don't allow any discussion on the distance for 300 feet.
Okay, and the part about it being a qualified credential property manager, is that a change?
That's in here. No.
Is that a change?
That is a change.
From the current?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I like that the way it's written, it actually is written with some teeth. Previously discussed, it was pretty.
Okay, so it would remain as is, except we would incorporate and maintain, make sure that our distance requirements are in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
So number 3?
Yep. Let me just reread this one real quick.
That would include adding Buena Vista and Lobiera and Montalvo into an
Yeah,
STLU overlay.
so number 3 is that we very clearly outline that the 2 maps provided in attachment 2, I think it is. No, sorry, Exhibit A. Yeah, Exhibit A are very clearly outlined now, and no discussion will be entertained outside of those exhibits. So the one recommendation this evening that we add an industrial area in North Beach, I'm not willing to discuss that. This is no option for me. It's the areas that are outlined on this map, and that is it, going to the Planning Commission.
Now, we got part of the North Beach area was because the residents came to us, they asked us, they wanted to be included, right?
Yeah, well, that's in there, though. It's on this map on Exhibit A, so, but it's a different area than what Mike said.
Yeah, and then we're talking also about that, and we're only adding some of the area that's mixed use, commercial mixed use.
No, I'm not
No.
entertaining that.
Not
No.
at this time.
Yeah.
That would be an amendment.
If you want to discuss converting that to like hotel use in the future, I think that'd be a great location for it, but I'm not going to discuss STLU today. So.
Number 4 is, oh wait, what about Lobiera Montalvo?
So that's part of the maps.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's
whatever the
on-
maps say.
Yeah, whatever the maps say, that's it. We're not
Okay.
going to talk
So
about
that's
anything
what we
outside
are
that.
sending to the Planning Commission.
Yep,
Okay, can I just talk a little bit on that?
absolutely.
Would the council consider, I have, Lobiera Montalvo, I don't have that many concerns on, because when we did this before, we kind of knew we were not hearing from them. We never heard from the owners or the STLU people. And so this 18-month review, we thought we would be probably adding those. They do seem to not mind in that area having those. However, on Buena Vista, this council has gotten a lot of letters in past years from tenants that have been kicked out on Buena Vista in favor, or going to be kicked out because this STLU thing became a big deal, and they were notified that they were going to be kicked out. But as being a ex-planning commissioner, Buena Vista has come up quite a lot. It's a very narrow street, it's very steep, it's rounded corners where parking becomes very, very difficult to do where the intersections are. And I have an issue. I don't know that Buena Vista should be added there. We already have concern with parking in that area now, except if we did add the residential parking,
Solve
that
that
would
problem.
take care of it. But I think we're going to be adding a lot of red curbs in the area. So I think we send it to Planning Commission, but tell them that we understand that parking is an issue, and that maybe they might come back with a recommendation that area not be added, if they don't think that the parking waivers or the parking
Well,
permits.
that's why it's going to them, for them to
No,
figure that out.
I agree, but I want the Planning Commission to know what we think on that, and I want to acknowledge
that.
that parking is an issue on Buena Vista, and I'm not sure that that is good land use planning, and I want that in the record.
Well, I think that the good thing about, we're including the maps in this recommendation to create this box, is that this is the area at which you can expand to. Anything less than that is your purview as well, but this is the maximum we're allowing expansion to. Before we move off of 3, I didn't include densities. So there is no mention on number 3 of densities that currently exist. I want those included on number 3 as well, so that's boxed in. We're not going to be looking at increasing that density to 25 or 26, not even 21. It's 20, that's the number. So that's amortization.
The last one is the big question, and you might
That's
have
it.
already answered it in the first one, about the amortization period.
Yeah, so the fourth one, the amortization, you know, I'm not a fan of it, personally. But, you know, my biggest concern with this initially when we talked about it was workforce housing. I shared my story with you, Lori, was nodding her head when our entire apartment building was kicked out in favor of short-term lodging, and we're all local workforce housing. I think what we did initially, which was great, was we memorialized the number of STLUs that are approved by saying, hey, this is the deadline to apply. If you didn't get in, you didn't get in. And so for me, I think we accomplished that goal. I'm not happy about the amortization in medium and high density zones, but I think it's a little bit more tolerable, and I'm comfortable moving forward with it as it's outlined here.
Could we have legal weigh in on this idea? Because it's a good idea if you think it's going to not put us back here a year from now.
Well, I have no, in terms of the litigation, I don't know, but that will just remain to be seen, Councilmember. But whether it's rational to conclude that the amortization should phase out faster in what are clearly designed to be
neighborhoods,
low-density residential neighborhoods, that makes sense to me, and I think that dichotomy is defensible.
Okay.
It's just a question, and so I would have no problem with us doing that as a matter of policy. What will fly with the other side will remain to be seen. So, but that's not what you're talking about. So
thank you.
Thanks.
I have an issue with the amortization. I think we were hoping when we went into this court-mandated mediation that there would be some solutions that would come up. But to ask for 10 years plus 5 more, any reasonable person would think that that means forever. It's not really amortizing it more years. It's really asking for that use to stay. And unfortunately, that's what they were asking for, was forever. So I would recommend that we don't do the amortization, but we give staff clear direction on the application for hardship, because those applications, to me, have to be turned in enough time to where that use has an answer by June when this use is up. Because part of what was in here was that these got to keep operating if and until, and keep accepting rental agreements if and until their hardship or the amortization was up. And I don't agree with that. I think that the amortization is June. That's when it's up. They should have to apply. Whether we have to, Scott, in order to comply with the court, we hire an independent consultant or accountant, not a staff member, to determine whether there's a financial hardship. Maybe we do that, but I think the uses should pay for that. If they're asking for financial hardship, they should have to pay for looking at it, because if they just frivolously file one and they really don't qualify, they should be paying for the cost of us doing that. And this is going to take considerable staff time to do, and so maybe we should be hiring someone to do that. And I don't know if that would that get us out of some of the
I don't know, it's a good idea.
Discretion?
It's a great idea. It's more than fair, and that's certainly something that could be explored as this goes back.
Well, the only thing, if we do that, we're going to need to ask Planning Commission to really come up with a clear and precise list of qualifications of what they're going to look at and consider for hardship.
I don't think that's planning. I think that's a legal business thing.
So Scott, we discussed this when we discussed it previously. That's going to fall on legal, not planning, to come up with that. And they have a backbone or a structure that they can use to do that. And so that's not a planning commission, that's a legal thing. But before we get off this point, Kathy, because I think you're making a good point, but I want some more discussion on this. And Cecilia, if I could have you step up, or Amber, I'm not sure. I just have some questions on number of STLU permits we have currently, that sort of stuff. So whoever would be best suited for that.
I'll start, and then
I know we've got these numbers in the past, but they're not included in the staff report, and I apologize for not giving you these questions ahead of time. So you mentioned there's roughly 150 in residential low. What is the total number of STLU permits that we issued 2 Mays ago, or whatever it was?
Okay, so back in February of 2016, when we closed the door on any new STLU permits, there were 512.
512 issued.
Vacation rental permits.
Okay, so minus the 150, you're looking at 350, roughly 362.
Yeah,
How many of those 512 are active? would you say?
Well, currently, there are now only 225 registered short-term lodging units.
225 registered.
Yes, so of those vacation rental permittees from 2 years ago, 512, only 225 came back in to register their properties. If they're not... So they're the only ones that qualify? Yes,
Yeah.
they're the only ones that qualify, the 225.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so Kathy, I hear what you're saying. I think, in the effort of trying to find a good middle ground, I think as opposed to this 10 and 5 and everything, we just say, hey, it's a 10-year for medium and high density. Because one of the things that I heard initially from what I would call credible sources from this community is there have been vacation rentals working in this community for 30 plus years in these medium and high density zones, and they're good business operators. And so for me, the numbers that we're talking about, I think it bears out, hey, if you've been good, you have a permit, you got a permit when you should, you've met all the deadlines and you're still operating on good faith, I think 10 years is well within your rights, and that's an additional 8. And we're only talking in medium and high density zones. We're not talking about adding new ones, we're not talking about anything else, it's just those ones that are in existence that are good operators.
Can we add requirements that if the people are not in good standing and we do an audit, if they apply for an extension of the 2, or is it an automatic 8? Would they have to apply for an extension?
I'm trying to find a middle ground here,
I know.
right? And so my thought is just an additional 8. We just call it done. It's an additional 8. So that way everybody gets 10 years. I think that's very clear notification. You have plenty of time. And there is no hardship application past that point. It's just 10 years.
Yeah, and I still want to include a drop-dead, hard-ass, you
Can you
don't
say that?
follow the rules.
Yeah.
I just did. You don't follow the rules, you're closed down, you're out, that's it. You got to treat your neighbors with respect, and they deserve as much peace and quiet as anyone else does. So if they don't comply, I don't care where they are in their amortization schedule, it's done.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had asked before in the ordinance is that every year when everyone re-ups their permit, if they have not operated or paid any TOT, that permit is pulled. Laguna Beach does it, and that's how they dwindle down their issues. So I would ask if we considered that at all and told Planning Commission to consider it, that we also ask that that be added to the permitting system, where they get pulled.
You want to get staff's opinion on that before we move forward with that? Do you want to comment?
I'll talk about it, use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. I like it. Hard ass, use it or lose it.
Because if they're not operating and paying TOT, they can't just hold on to permit and say, well, I might want to do it in 5 years.
Yeah, so in May of this year, when we had the new STLU applications come in for vacation permits to re-register, that was one of the factors that we considered, that they had to be current on their TOT. And we do have staff in the finance division that regularly audits, and we have been issuing notices and, if we have to, citations for violators of non-payment of TOT.
Cool.
It is considered one of the strikes.
But if they're not operating at all, we let them continue and hold on to the permit if they want to re-up it. Is that correct? Because they're still in compliance, they just haven't operated.
That's correct, yes. You, in order to, you don't lose your permit if you don't utilize it. As long as you keep registering and your license is valid or your zoning permit is valid, it's if the use isn't occurring, it doesn't mean that you don't get to reapply every year.
The only issue with that I would say, if by not pulling it, is you're allowing someone for that 10-year period or the 8 more years to keep asking for a permit and not using it, and you're not allowing someone that might want to do it in that 20% or whatever it is, allowing them to do it. That's why Laguna Beach, I believe, does it. Plus, they're trying to get down where they don't have vacation rentals in residential neighborhoods.
Before
Yeah, let them look at it.
is that legal, Scott? I mean, just off the top of your head, does that sound like that's something that's feasible?
We'd want to see how that works, but yeah, it could be explored.
Okay.
Okay, so we can
Just
add
put
that
that
to
on the list.
planning to consider or set?
point.
Okay. So with the caveat that the condition that we go to residential parking permits, to control that parking, that would be in those higher
Yeah,
density.
So let me just go back over.
Then I would consider possibly the extra 8, but it was only if that is attached. I will be voting no if that is not attached when it comes back.
Yeah, no, I think that's the beauty of this whole thing, is if we create these boxes that the planning commission looks at these issues in, when they come back, if they deviate from the plan at all, it's very simple for us to say, well, this is a deviation of the plan. We're not going to discuss this, so.
And to begin, we have to address the parking issue. I mean, that's a,
yeah.
That has to be done. And then we have to address the quality of life, which is, being respectful, the ballot parties, all the other stuff going on. It's just, no, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And so just so I'm clear, this hardship clause, which, arguably was the wiggle room in the last ordinance, so for the residential low, is that being scrubbed out?
I'm recommending there's no change from the initial ordinance that we adopted 2 years ago.
So that hardship clause remains? Okay, so that stays the same. And then for this 8-year group, 2 plus 8?
Yeah.
2 plus 8?
I already had 2, so they're going to do
Yeah.
8.
Then they're done, hard stop.
That's it.
Okay,
Hard
so
stop.
they don't get the hardship clause. All right. And I also wanted to say, I think that, I want to thank staff for the progress that's been made on this issue, because, this was different because it was a consent calendar item, but had you done a presentation, we would have been walked through the effectiveness of the enforcement program, the decline in the number of uses of this kind. And so I don't know how we signal this to Planning Commission as well, but we need to keep the pressure on. We've got a really good momentum going here in the enforcement category, and if there are ways, in addition to the parking, or other tools that they want to see in the toolbox, I would be very open to seeing that.
I do have a question for enforcement. When did the online system kick in as far as when they can go online directly and file a complaint?
That's years old.
Pardon?
That's years old. We've had on the city's website a button to lodge complaints that just generate an automatic email that goes out to all of code compliance, so.
Okay, but I thought we did some tweaking on it that recently that allowed, so that we're telling people not to call in, just go online and fill out that form. Am I wrong?
No, I'm not recalling.
Automated system?
The automated system, I thought we created.
We have a 24-hour answering service that's newer, but the online submit complaint button, that's been around for years.
Okay, all right. I thought we were being on same time responding to that more now than we were before.
Essentially, all of our complaints go through that submittal system. So the same thing that the answering service has access to, the same thing that calling code compliance's direct line will lead to is going into that system, typing up a complaint, and it just populates all the right fields in our project tracking software.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So on the points that we went through, 1 through 4, is there consent on that? That's what we're going to send down to the planning commission?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Joanne, do you need that
I'll just walk
clarified?
through it so that way
Okay.
Joanne has it. So I'm gonna, let me pull up the thing here. 5H, is that what we're looking at? Yeah, so I move that we initiate a zoning ordinance amendment to consider proposed revisions regarding the regulation of short-term lodging units and refer this item to the planning commission to provide a recommendation to the council with very specific guidelines for the planning commission to include, number 1, that residential low, there will be no proposed or discussed changes in relation to the original ordinance, 2 ordinances adopted 2 years ago, which are 1622 and 1623. And then what we'll call is now bullet point number 2, which is STLU parking. We will add to that we will initiate a parking permit program for all STLU zones, residential parking permit process, just like we have in Lobera, Montalvo, and we've started in North Beach. Which will be now number 3, is the Star Property Manager will include.
Did you miss number 2?
No, I'm just changing the numbers because I added a new number 1. So So, yeah. So the new number 3, which is Star Property Manager, will include in it the strict provision of the distance of 300 feet between stars. The new number 4, which is modifications to the STLU overlay, includes specifically the maps in attachment 2, and we will not consider any areas outside of that, but of course any area less than that is their purview, as well as the 20% density will be assured in those zones as well, with the caveat that
Also the comments about, is it good land use planning and parking issues?
the mayor has concerns over Buena Vista. And I share those concerns as well. And then the new number 5, which is allowances for extended amortization. Well, obviously, because of rule number 1, only applied to RM and RH, residential medium, residential high, and it'll be a maximum of 10 years, so it's 2 plus 8. That's it.
Do we need to say anything about whether they,
Yeah, with a clean record.
with a clean record, but do we need to add whether they can operate during the time of their filing for a amortization in the low, residential low? There was something in here that they were allowed to operate, to keep operating. So maybe that wasn't in the changes, maybe that was in the current.
That's what they're filed for, a hardship.
Okay, we'll talk about the hardship at the time. So I have a motion by hand.
Well, hold on,
Okay.
I forgot one piece that was critical of that, which is legal staff will address, as this goes to planning, the non-utilized STLU permits, I guess is what we call it. The use it, lose it hardship line is also included in the amortization as well.
Okay.
I love making sausage, it's awesome.
Yep. Motion by Ham, second by Donchek, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it. And Scott, the quick question about whether there was a mention of asking for a stay in litigation pending the Coastal Commission, is that something that we should consider?
You know, that's a really good idea that we tried with them,
Okay.
just taking this whole thing to coastal, because that was their prerogative, and they weren't willing to do that.
Okay.
But
All right. Well, then that
the
answers that
timelines in the
question.
settlement that we stipulated to can still be met with the direction and schedule that you signed on to tonight.
All right. I wanted that answered. So we'll wait just a minute. That was a lot of people. So let's go.
Next is report from the Public Works Director, City Engineer, concerning the possibility of updating City Design Immunity Policy Number 801-2 and amending the municipal code to reflect the new city position of Utilities Director.
And I would suggest if we've all read the report and there's no one in the audience to speak, I'm ready to make a motion.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this issue 9A?
I think the
Seeing-
audience just walked away.
Seeing no one?
All right.
Tom, I didn't even see you in the crowd.
Oh, I was
Were you
hiding
outside?
the-
Okay.
Yeah, he's a ninja. Okay. I move that we approve and adopt updated City Policy 801-2 entitled Design Immunity, that we also introduce ordinance number 1648 entitled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Clemente, California, amending chapters 2.20, 2.24, 13.04, 13.12, 13.24, 13.32, 13.34, 13.40, and 13.44 of the Municipal Code of the City of San Clemente to assign authorities to the new Utilities Director position.
Motion by Donchek. Second by Swartz, all in favor? Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Nice talking, Tom, enjoyed it.
Oral Communications Part 2, I don't have a card.
All we have left is OCFA and
Yes, currently, this next item is City Representative to Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District Board of Trustees. Jim Dahl's term on that board will expire January 1st of 2018. So council has a choice here. You could either appoint a member of your body to serve as the city's representative on that board for either a 2 or a 4-year term, or you could direct me to advertise for applications from San Clemente registered voters.
Joanne, I love hearing your beautiful voice, but I'm going to read it for you. So I move that we direct the city clerk to advertise and solicit applications from the San Clemente registered voter to fill the vacancy for the city representative on the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District Board of Trustees. Further, that the council scheduled interviews for the council meeting December 19th, 2017, time to be determined. And the two ladies who keep coming in and talking to us about this, I highly suggest you apply this time.
Sure don't want just to appoint Tim to it?
No. So motion by.
Well, you
go
need
ahead.
to decide whether you want to, when I recruit, am I recruiting for a 2-year term or a 4-year term?
Ooh. Two.
Two?
Yeah.
See if they work out?
Yes, absolutely.
And,
Okay.
and what time on December 19th? Did you want to do it before your closed session?
Not very many
4:30?
items.
I have had a couple inquiries.
Right.
For people who are interested in this, so.
Does it have to, but that's so unfair to applicants that are trying to get away for the holiday season or might have kids on, you know. Is there any way we could do it in January?
Joanne, I have an idea. Can we schedule these pending number of applications?
I have to advertise it.
Oh,
I know, but,
which has to include the
We should have to have
date
a date and a time.
to advertise.
okay, so let's put a date and time, but if we only get one applicant, then,
Yeah.
Then it's going to be a real short time.
well, we don't even have to do an interview at that point, right? Lori, do you have any issues with that?
I just know that if people have families or if they have holiday plans, like we're pushing right up against it, and I'd hate to lose qualified candidates because of that.
My only thought
So-
is, 4 years in a row now, we've asked for people, and no one's applied other
All
than
right.
Jim. And so if that happens again,
That's true.
Yeah.
If it's Jim, or Jim,
yeah. So let's put the time on there, but it's contingent upon number of applicants.
Okay, so December 19th, 4 PM.
Wait, is there closed session start at 4:30 that day?
We haven't set a time yet for it. Depends on how much we.
guys, it's December 19th.
It's before Christmas, nothing is happening.
So 4:30,
So-
okay.
4:30, boom.
30.
So we'll do the interviews at 4:30?
Yes.
And closed session
At 4:31.
Yes.
Yeah.
4:31, trust me. It'll be 4:31.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so motion by Ham. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Schwartz, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0.
City manager? City attorney?
I've said everything I need to, thanks.
Yeah,
Council
I just want to say thank you to Adam and Tamian for stepping into the manager position over at Code Enforcement. That is not an easy job, and I just want to know that I, for one, am grateful, and I'm sure I speak for all of City Council when I say thank you.
Yeah, I miss him as a planning commission, a planner. I do. I was sad when he moved over, but I think he is the right person for the job.
So I have something a little bit lengthy, so bear with me. This is going to be my exit strategy announcement that we've been waiting for. So those of you that have known me for a while know that I got into politics to be a role model for my daughter, who at the time was in 7th grade. And in addition to my terrific daughter, I have a terrific son and a great husband, but the journey into politics was pretty much about my daughter. Tonight signals the final chapter of the life lesson associated with my foray into politics. As I said, I got into this 15 years ago to be a role model. It was a challenge for my daughter who wanted proof that a woman could be whatever she chose to be if she worked hard enough. At the time, I was a school teacher, and she thought I should try to be a mayor, and we did it together every step of the way. So even though elections are next November, I'm announcing tonight that I won't be running for re-election in 2018. I do it publicly and tonight for 3 reasons. One is at the next meeting in December, the 5 of us will be shuffling responsibilities on council, and as 2018 will be my last year, it's not advisable that I take on new roles. Continuity is a vital part of successful governance. If my colleagues desire, I'll continue with those responsibilities I have, or we can even talk about transition for those. The second bigger reason I'm making this announcement tonight is to let the community know there will be a vacancy on the city council next year. I encourage anyone who is interested to start thinking about it now and running for my vacated position. Leadership San Clemente held its graduation last week, and I was so proud of the 20-some people that stepped up to participate in that. We've had some very strong folks that have run in other elections and not quite made it. We also have excellent people on city commissions and committees. Our town is a gem. We deserve the best possible leadership, and I make myself available to anybody who wants to talk about what it feels like to run a campaign and seek election. So the third reason I'm sharing my decision tonight is for my daughter, Lisa. The lesson tonight is called Exit Strategy, and what I want her to know is it's never a good idea to abandon ship, take the marbles and go home, or leave when your work is incomplete. Instead, my advice to her is to follow orderly transition, engage your teammates in the process, and stay strong until the very last day. Ideally, identifying a successor is the good, right thing as well, and I hope to participate in that. So I'll show you what this looks like by actions and not just words in the months ahead, but being the quick study that you are, my daughter, you probably already get it. So I've loved my 3 terms. I'm honored that the community chose me to elect me to this important job, and I intend to leave the city better than it was when I started. And then finally, in case you're wondering, my daughter has loved the experience. When asked, she says she learned a wealth of good life lessons during her teenage years. Her advice is, 1, have a plan and do it. 2, don't be afraid to embrace your weaknesses. 3, don't be afraid to ask for help, because politics is a team sport. Next, be curious, and also what she's marveled at the most is that real change happens at the local level. Being a city council person is a truly worthwhile use of time. And that's what my daughter would want you to know. So that concludes my comments, and happy Thanksgiving.
Is Lisa in college?
No, she's out. She got married in September. She went to college. She got a job with benefits. She's all good. Yeah. She lives in Northern California right now.
Is she volunteering?
For what?
Anything.
Yeah. She turned out well.
Oh, okay.
Do you have anything? No. Okay. I have something that I want the council to consider. As you know, in the downtown business district, the T-zone, we do not allow parking waivers currently. We just don't. There's no parking waivers allowed. But there is something that we can do to support improvements in the downtown, and that is a parking in lieu fee program, initiating that. And so what that, Dana Point has that, and so do other people. What that does is if someone comes in, it doesn't mean they're automatically going to get these waivers, I believe. It means that if we do give waivers, there's a fee addressed to that. And what it does is we will set the fee, and it quantifies the financial benefit to the applicant for the parking waiver that they're going to get. And the money would go to anything that we have to do to mitigate the fact that they did not provide those parking spaces. So if someone comes in, I know of an office right now that needs 2 parking waivers. They're just expanding, they're not adding people, but they can't get them. So they would have to pay for 2 parking, or whatever we have to do to mitigate those 2 parking spaces not being added. We also know that it's just a matter of time before more people are going to come in.
So so you're asking to initiate
I'm
this process?
asking to initiate it to where staff would come back to us on what that program could look like, what the fees might be, the cost, what maybe it could do. Maybe it could pay for extending the trolley, hours, days, where it goes, so that we are accounting for the less parking. Maybe it goes to paying for some of our lots. Maybe it goes to enforcement. Whatever we need to do to mitigate the lack of parking, because we know it's going to happen where people are going to come in, and we should have some type of a program to help pay for mitigating that. Or we're not going to be able to add any waivers.
I have a million questions on this issue.
Well, we might. So can staff can you say just staff bring a report and then we ask all the questions?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So just how it would, it might
No
work.
recommendation, it's just a
No
report.
recommendation, just to look at it.
Yeah.
We did?
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd like to maybe to pull in some samples of other cities doing it.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. So that's all I have.
Move to, do you want the second reading?
Yep.
Okay, I move that we adopt Ordinance 1647 entitled, "An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Clemente, California, amending Section 13.04.220, subsections A through D, and adding subsection E of the San Clemente Municipal Code relating to water rates."
Motion by Doncheck, second by Swartz. All in favor? Aye. Passes 4-0.
And now I move that we adjourn to our next meeting, which is December 5th at 5 p.m. for closed session, the regular business meeting at 6 PM in council chambers.
Motion by Doncheck, second by Ham. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We're done.
Thanksgiving.